after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Moving the Goalposts. I'm Nick DiMartino.
I'm Liam Barwick.
All right, so we are presented by Wolf Spreads. But first, let me just get into all the social media stuff. You can follow us across social media at MTGP on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. You could follow the ETB Network at same thing at ETB Network, the Empty the Bench Network on social media on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And you can follow us on YouTube, youtube.com/ETB Network. And you could get our podcast, etbpodcast.com. You could listen to this show wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe. And we are presented by Wolf Spreads. Hold on, let me pull this. Hold on. So, okay. We are presented by Wolf Spreads. Are you looking to get involved in the action while rooting for your favorite team? Have you ever had a friendly debate on who can pick more games correctly? Does all this talk about parlays, lines, and over-unders make your head spin, and you want to learn more about the sports betting hoopla? Gamble with us and come check out Wolf Spreads. All NFL season, we've been running a sports betting competition completely free on Wolf Spreads app. Here's how it works. Everybody gets 2,000 fantasy dollars. That's fake money to bet on the action. Whoever can profit the most with their $2,000 bankroll wins. And if you're not an NFL fan, don't worry. Wolf Spreads has competitions available for the NBA, MLB, NHL, and college football and basketball. But put fantasy dollars on the over-under, the money line, or the spreads, competing for bragging rights with your fellow players while having additional fun watching sports, and not risk losing your house in the process. Wolf Spreads, sports betting for friends who love the action. Okay, so I think that's everything. So there's a lot. Actually, not a lot going on. It's early March. I guess in a week or so there'll be more going on. But it's still sort of before March Madness. And right now, there's a lot of NFL free agency stuff. The big story right now is Russell Wilson in less than a week is going to be released by the Broncos. This isn't really surprising to anybody because he was benched because of the whole injury guarantee thing. I don't know where he's going to go. This is the most of any... I'd always say this, of any quarterback that I've seen, I've never seen a star quarterback hurt his reputation the way Russell Wilson has. It's also the first time we've ever seen a quarterback or any athlete get preemptively released like the week before. I don't know. What were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about this on a few months ago when we talked about Pete Carroll, which was that Pete Carroll had a lot more to do with Russell Wilson's success than I think people realized, especially system he implemented. I think also I thought it was interesting that you would bring in Russell Wilson and trade all this assets for Russell Wilson to essentially you're doing that to compete, which I think you had the point on another show that one of the reasons they probably did it was they were looking at the rest of the division who had 3 good quarterbacks and 3 good teams and said that we need to do something to compete. but then also you're going to bring in Nathaniel Hackett, who's a first-time head coach, which is an odd move for a team that's competing. So I think, and then obviously there was an ownership change during this time as well. So I think it was kind of a chaotic situation, and it just was never going to materialize into something good.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. Yeah. I was saying that like they were in a situation where the rest of the division, it just seemed like such a daunting task. I mean, we laugh at the Chargers and Raiders now, but I mean, even now when you look at the Chargers, they still have a lot of potential. I mean, they weren't a good team last year, but they also just fired Brandon Staley, and they still have a young quarterback. I mean, it's not exactly, they're not exactly a team to sneeze at right now. And Jimmy Garoppolo got injured for the Raiders, so we don't know what they could have done if he hadn't gotten injured. They could have been a playoff team. So even now, they're not exactly in a very good position when it comes to their division. It's not like they're in the NFC South or something like that. But yeah, I was saying, I think it seemed like a move of desperation. But also, it doesn't really help when you're getting an aging quarterback while also trading away your whole future. So you're basically taking away everything that he could have to work with, or at least a lot of what he could have had to work with, and bringing in an aging quarterback that we kind of knew was a little bit in the decline. It just sort of turned out that he was in the decline a lot worse. Because Pete Carroll sort of masked it a little bit because he played in a very good system.
Right.
That's really what it was. I think he was just in a really good situation with Pete Carroll. But the thing is that he's declining in a way that he's sort of declined in a way that seems sort of unprecedented for star quarterbacks. It's very uncommon to see it at this point. And he's not, like I said, he's not that old. He's 34, 35. I mean, he's not that old to the point where he would decline so much so quickly in such a short amount of time. And nobody really could have anticipated it being this bad. I mean, if you were to say the worst case scenario is like before the trade, nobody would have ever anticipated this. It would have sounded like a fever dream if I had told, if you had predicted something like this. But I don't know. He's still going to get paid. It'll get paid like a veteran's minimum somewhere, and a team's going to take him. It'll still be worth something.
Yeah, but again, like I just didn't understand. Like I felt like if you bring in a first time head coach, like that's not a lot of teams do that are competing. So like you have to set. I feel like when you do that as well, like a coach you know nothing about in terms of how he's going to head coach, you sort of start to set yourself up for failure, which I could understand. I could have understood as well. Another, the Broncos could have went the complete other way, which is like, the three teams are so good in our division that instead of, trying to compete and trying to keep up, we could try and, see what Drew Lock is, bring in a first-year head coach. We're not going to, win a lot, but we might be able to develop our team to the point that in a year or two, or in 2 or 3 years, when those teams are starting to decline a little bit, we'll be on the rise. I felt like that hindsight is 2020, but that might have been a better plan for the Broncos especially long term than this was.
What I think happened was, I think they just didn't believe in Drew Lock anymore, and they didn't want what they viewed as a project as opposed to a proven quarterback, which, to be fair, most teams probably would do. Like, I don't know how many teams would look at Drew Lock and be when they could just trade for a guy like Russell Wilson. I think that's probably what a lot of teams would have done in that situation, because their feeling was, we want to win right now and we don't want to be a rebuilding team. And that's what I think their mindset probably was, because the thing with young quarterbacks is at least half of them don't pan out, and fan bases and teams really just don't have the patience for them. And I get that as a Jet fan. I mean, for how long do we hear about young quarterbacks not being able to start because they're not ready? I think sometimes football is overcomplicated. I think sports are often overcomplicated. We don't need to wait for quarterbacks to get PhDs until we find out if they're any good. You usually know within a year or two if a quarterback is any good. And I think that was their feeling about Drew Lock, and maybe the Seahawks had a bit of a different perspective. I'm not saying they should have given up on Drew Lock so soon. I'm just saying that's probably what their mindset was.
Yeah, I could see that, but yeah, I mean, obviously, just didn't work out, and but also then I think that what makes the situation work. Like a lot of teams will bring in an older quarterback who doesn't work out, but what they gave up and what they paid for Wilson is what makes it worse than a normal situation.
Yeah. What they gave up was it makes this arguably the worst trade in NFL history. And yeah, I mean, most trades don't have a clear winner or loser, but this one is just so obvious, a clear winner and loser. It seems like a total dumpster fire. It's just such a disaster over there.
Yeah, I agree.
But where do you think you see any possible? I can see him maybe going to Atlanta.
I honestly would see. I don't see him starting the year as a starter next year.
You don't think so?
No, because again, I mean, I think that Atlanta, like you said, I think Atlanta is going to. My opinion would be that I think Atlanta will draft a quarterback. I don't think that Atlanta's going to start Desmond Ridder next year. But I mean, it's a heavy quarterback draft. You have to realize this is a bad time to be a quarterback free agent because this is one of the heaviest quarterback drafts we've had in a while.
Yeah, but
there could be 6 guys that could go in the first round right now.
Right, but a lot of times teams don't want to start rookie quarterbacks right away. That's also a common thing.
I mean, a place I could see him going is somewhere maybe that he's going, where they've drafted a quarterback and he's going to mentor the quarterback. I think
that's what I'm saying. Even if he doesn't start, though, he'll still be going somewhere, and the Broncos will be bearing the cost.
I feel like a good place for that is I think that the Patriots are going to draft Jaden Daniels. So I think that would be a good place for him to go because again, you have a very mobile quarterback. I think that would be a good person for him to mentor.
Yeah. There's also a problem, like you just mentioned, the first-time head coach.
Well, yeah, but this is a completely different scenario now. He's not going. I don't think he's going to go to a team that's looking to win the Super Bowl. Do you? I don't think there's a team out there that thinks he's the final piece. Where I think the Broncos did think he's the final piece.
True, I think that's the difference. Yeah, I think that's true to an extent. I guess the only difference between the Broncos and the Patriots is that the Broncos thought they had a chance, and the Patriots have sort of accepted that they don't have much of a chance. Right. I would say that's the biggest difference. But I mean, you're also going to a potentially very tough division, possibly the hardest division in football. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy,
but they're not looking to compete, though.
Right. I get that, but at the same time, it's part of me thinks the whole mentorship thing might be a little bit overrated. I mean, I think if a quarterback isn't good, he's just not good. I mean,
but don't you think
that by Aaron Rodgers?
But don't you think that? Yeah, but so okay, exactly. So, but don't you think that Aaron Rodgers benefited greatly from sitting behind Favre, and then also don't you think that Jordan Love benefited greatly from sitting behind Rodgers?
Yeah, I do. But
the sample size though of Zach Wilson being behind Rodgers is extremely small.
True. And maybe he did benefit from it on some level. It could also just be, it might not just be that. It could also just be these franchises just tend to be better at developing quarterbacks.
And the other thing about Zach Wilson is that I feel like the damage has already been done to Zach Wilson. In that a lot of these guys who mentor, they haven't played or anything yet. Where Wilson's played, been horrible, been cast out by the media, stuff like that. I think that
Zach Wilson.
Zach Wilson, yeah.
Well, yeah, everybody's calling him a bust, and which is true. And everybody knows that he sucks, but he'll go somewhere. I mean, you see the Jets. They said they allowed him to request a trade.
Yeah, I'm perplexed by what the Jets' plan is. Very perplexed by what the Jets' plan
Well,
is.
I'm a little bit perplexed by what their plan was, but I think it was a good idea to have Zach
Right,
Wilson.
but so they're going to put all their eggs into the basket of we have to win the Super Bowl in the next 2 years, basically, right? I mean,
it sounds like it. Or
I think they're going to go out and get a quarterback, and
or at least it could be. I don't know. That's what it looks like so far.
But if they're good, then they won't be able to get a good quarterback if they're good.
Oh, in the draft.
Right.
But at the same time, they could have that plan and still get a decent backup, because it turns out, like, if your plan is to win the Super Bowl in the next 2 years, you still should get a decent backup, considering Aaron Rodgers getting injured at some point. I'm sure if you could bet on it, the odds would be like minus 200 or something like that. I mean, like, Aaron Rodgers getting injured and missing at least one game is most likely going to happen. So that could make a very big difference. I mean, if you were to get even though that quarterback's not necessarily going to win you a Super Bowl exactly, I mean, you're still in a very tough division, and one game can make a really big difference. So you don't want to be stuck with nothing backing up Aaron Rodgers. So even if that is the plan, they still should do something with that. They also need to do something about the offensive line, because you can't have a 40-year-old quarterback running for his life. It doesn't matter how great he is.
Yeah, I agree.
No, I don't know. I mean, I will say this, though. Everybody loves to rag on Zach Wilson and everything. I will have to say, I think Sam Darnold's a bigger bust than Zach Wilson.
No.
You don't think so? Okay, nobody seems to agree with me on this. I think and now don't get me wrong, Sam Darnold's a better player than Zach Wilson. I totally agree. But that doesn't mean he's a bigger bust. That doesn't mean he's not a bigger bust, because I think the expectations for Zach Wilson for Sam Darnold were so much higher than they were for Zach Wilson.
The team around Darnold was worse by leaps and bounds than the team around Wilson.
I agree. I also agree that I also think the team did a lot more for Zach Wilson than they did for Sam Darnold. I am not saying that Sam Darnold is worse than Zach Wilson.
That would destroy your point.
No, I said he's a bigger bust. I said he's a bigger bust. I did not say he's a worse player. The reason I say that is because the expectations for Sam Darnold were.
Well, also Sam Darnold was better though when he played until he got mono. He was better than.
You think mono ruined his career?
Well, I think he was better at the time than Wilson was. I don't know if it ruined his career, but he was better than better than Wilson in those games.
He got mono in a very early in his career. It's hard to.
But I didn't say that. I said that he was better in the games before he got mono. When he was playing full-time starter.
No, but you're missing the point that I'm making. The point that I'm making is I don't think Zach Wilson is as much of a bust as people say he is, because his expectation, he was not like Jamarcus Russell or Ryan Leaf or Sam Darnold, or the world was expected of him. I don't remember there being expectations for Zach Wilson that were that high to the point where everybody thought he was going to be the next superstar. Like, okay, yeah, sure, he's a bust. But the truth is, when Zach Wilson was drafted, I think most Jet fans were like, okay, I like this pick. Cool, pretty good. He might be good. He might not be. It wasn't like Sam Darnold would have been the number one pick on any team except the Browns. Sam Darnold was hyped the entire college football season before as like the next coming. Like, it just, I don't think those expectations were the same. Like, like Zach Wilson, I think there was a lot more agnosticism around Zach Wilson when he was drafted. Like, I don't know.
I mean, they both suck, yeah.
I mean, they both suck. I'm just saying one's a bigger bust. All right. So, by the way, the Giants, your team, they're not franchise tagging Saquon.
Yeah, this is the right move. I mean, they've been in a a state of rebuild, not rebuild, rebuild, not rebuild for the longest time. I don't think that the first thing that's important to note is just because they're not franchise tagging him doesn't mean that he's not coming back to the Giants.
Right.
But I don't think that he's worth $12 million, which is what you would have to give the franchise tag.
Right.
They didn't give the transitional tag to Xavier McKinney, so they might give the franchise tag. But that might be why they also didn't franchise tag him. But the thing I think about Saquon is he's the second best running back in the NFL. I think he's got the most talent of anyone at the position in the NFL. No question about it. He changes the game when he's on the field for the Giants. But the key word in that sentence is when he's on the field, because he's frequently not on the field. And even last year, he missed a gigantic string of games in the season. They weren't that many, but it was 5 or 6 games that were determinant to where the season was going to go. I think they were about 1-2 when he got injured. And so I think that they have to figure out what they want to do. They made a colossal mistake, I think, last year by signing Daniel Jones to a big contract. And they have a lot of figuring things out to do. And I just don't think that paying a running back who's not on the field frequently $12 million is the best idea in terms of going forward, especially then because you're just going to lose him at the end of the year anyway.
Right. Right. No, I totally agree, especially when like if you have a really good running back and the rest of your team sucks, there really isn't much of a point in having such a great running back. It's not really doing you any good. I do agree with you about Daniel Jones. I think he had an okay year and ended up becoming extremely overrated and extremely overpaid. They never should have done that. The only thing I'll say about that is I think it was a relatively low risk move. It wasn't like, say, the Broncos getting it wasn't like the Broncos trading for Russell Wilson where they trade away their whole future, but they still wasted a whole lot of money, and that's a whole lot of cap space that they can't spend. And the truth is, there were a lot of quarterbacks out there that they could have. I mean, Tyrod Taylor was undoubtedly better than Daniel Jones was this past year. Like, there's just no doubt. And it turns out sometimes quarterbacks have a little bits of flash in the pan, but you know who they are, and they really just aren't that good. Daniel Jones has been around long enough that we just know who he is, and he's at best an average quarterback, at best, possibly even a below average quarterback. And he certainly was below average last year. He was probably worse than Zach Wilson was last year. So it just because he had an okay year with good coaching and a good situation doesn't mean he's worth that kind of money. And I think the Giants it would have been unpopular if they didn't do it, but it turns out that would have been the right move.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I don't know if I think that most people were split on Jones that year, and they had 2 guys that they could have given the extension to last year, and one guy they wanted to tag, and it was between Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. Now, I think that everyone would agree that you would give a big extension to a quarterback over a running back. I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
Well, depending on who the quarterback is,
especially one of Saquon's injury history.
Correct.
And we're going to see. I mean, also you have to take into account it's a very saturated running back market this year. There's not, they're at a premium right now this year. There's a lot of running backs.
2 years it's been like that. Running backs are very undervalued.
But there's a lot of good running backs out there this year. And so if the Giants think, well, we can get somebody who's maybe not as talented, but will stay on the field and stuff like that for, $10 million or $8 million, then I think that's better than the franchise tag. And they might think that Saquon is worth $12 million or worth $10 million, and they don't want to give him $12 million. I mean, Saquon has been going on and on about how he wants to stay a Giant, all this stuff. So we'll see. I mean, if he's offered $10 million by the Giants or $12 million by the Eagles, which one will he take? And I think that'll be interesting.
I think he'll probably take $12 million from the Eagles.
I don't know. Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. But I mean, he still might
But
end
I
up.
don't know if he's going to get $12 million though. I would.
Right.
I don't know if they might. There's been like a couple of pitchers which we talked about on the other show that we did this week, who were saying this whole free agency. Well, we think we're worth this amount, and we're turning down offers, and then are still unsigned. So just because somebody thinks that they could get something somewhere doesn't mean that they're exactly going to get it.
Right. No, absolutely. It's I've actually heard that or read that apparently he might go to the Texans.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know about that one. I mean, they're still a young building team.
But that's why they might want him.
Yeah.
They're a young team, but they're in a better position than the Giants are, and they're in a much easier division. So, whereas the Giants probably wouldn't see much use for Saquon, that I think is probably the difference.
Yes, I agree.
I don't know. Interesting stuff. Well, hold on a second. So, did you see this? The Bills like totally emptied their roster.
Yeah. Well, they emptied a lot of the defense.
A lot of defense, yeah.
They had to get rid of a lot of guys in order to get past the salary cap. They had to dump a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I think that this was basically just basically a salary dump, getting rid of like half of their defense. And that's the one bad thing in a cap sport about being a good team. The detriment of being a good team is you have to pay a lot of guys.
Yeah.
And so this is what happened here.
Well, if you're a team like the Mets, you pay a lot of guys and aren't good, so it's
right.
I'd rather pay a bunch of guys and at least be a good team. I don't think it's going to hurt them that much. Although the thing is, last year they were very injury riddled, and I think that really hurt them a lot. I don't think that them getting rid of a lot of their secondary is going to hurt them that much. They just had to do it. It was just too much money.
Yes,
it was way too much money.
Yeah, I agree.
So I do want to get into some basketball. Also Jason Kelce. I want to talk about Jason Kelce retired. He just announced his retirement. I feel like this is a really big story just because of his brother. I feel like if he retired last year, it wouldn't have been as big of a story.
Yeah, I agree.
So it is just kind of weird that it became such a big story just because of who his brother is.
Yeah, it really did. It was on national news and everything.
Even non-sport, even the news, non-sport shows were talking about it.
And I do agree. Like I think that that Travis Kelce had was a big reason of why this blew up to such a big story.
Yeah,
and especially I guess because they've their podcast has become popular and things like that. And I think that also his emotional showing of emotion at the press conference also I think helped to become a story.
Right, but I think that made it. I think that ended up making it a bigger story. But yeah, I think that's the biggest reason it was actually like I said, if this had happened last year, it wouldn't have been that big of a story. Did you see like Shaq broke the bobblehead?
Yes, I did see that at the Cavaliers game. Yes.
Yeah. So I do want to talk a little bit about the Knicks. Jalen Brunson had an injury scare. We all thought the season was over.
Yeah.
Partly because it looked a lot like Aaron Rodgers' injury. I am worried about the Knicks still. But were you watching this game live?
No, but I did see it on. I did see the replay, and when the replay happened, like when I watched it later that night, I agree. I thought the season was over. I can't imagine being a Knicks fan must have thought, here we go again with a knee injury. Late in the season, and the worst place like you can get injured in sports is the knee, non-contact.
Yeah.
And so they've said it's now only a contusion. He didn't go against the Hawks, but he'll probably go soon. I mean, thank God. But the Knicks, it's ruined. I mean, I think the Knicks have a team that when they had gone on a run with Anunoby, they were in the 2 seed, looking really good, and now they're with Brunson out. They're down 4 starters. And it's completely just derailed what I think was probably going to be a pretty special season. Especially if you look at how Milwaukee has fallen off. I think the Knicks are better than Cleveland. I mean, they beat Cleveland down 4 starters the other night in their building. And I think that they're, I think that the only team that was better than them in the Eastern Conference at that point was the Celtics. And I would still, right now we're in the 5. It's very possible, which I think a lot of Knicks fans aren't realizing and think about it. It's very possible that they slip into the play-in. They're only a game above the play-in. Right now, I think I would still, like our chances against Orlando in the playoffs, which is who we would play if the season ended right now. But you have to remember, I mean, just a lot of people think that, a lot of people have been saying that once the team gets healthy, they'll be able to make a run. I mean, you have to remember, basketball is the one sport of the 4 sports where it's most unlikely to make a run in the playoffs as a lower seed.
Right.
I mean, football and baseball and hockey are very like, if you're in it, you can win it. Where basketball, we've traditionally seen a team, besides like the Heat last year, we've traditionally seen the higher seeds win, no matter the talent. I mean, if you remember a couple of years ago, people were saying that the Celtics were going to be in trouble because they were playing the Nets, who were a 7 seed, and they had Kyrie and KD, and the Celtics swept the series.
Right.
So I think that that's, a detriment to the Knicks. And also, even if the guys come back in the next couple of weeks, they're only going to have a few games before the playoffs to create any kind of chemistry or anything with Anunoby and all these guys. So I think that the injuries have decimated the team, I think, beyond repair in terms of getting to the conference finals.
I mean, it could have. I mean, well, the point that you made, I mean, I think that the Knicks could easily. I think the Knicks are better than the Cavs and the Magic, even though they're ahead of us in the standings. I mean, I would be concerned about the Bucks, although considering how bad the Bucks have been, I feel like anything is possible. The one team that is without question better than the Knicks right now is the Celtics. I mean, the biggest reason, there's a few reasons, but I think the biggest reason is the fact that everything is a series. Everything is a 7-game series in basketball, other than the play-in. So it's a lot harder to win a 7-game series when you're the inferior team. Whereas in football, anything can happen because it's just one game. In baseball, I think that the difference between the first, but I think that there's a lot more parity when you talk about playoff teams in baseball because, like in baseball, there's not as big of a difference, and between say the best team and say the 5th best team in basketball.
Well, the difference also the difference in baseball is in a series in baseball is that the best player, the most important player on the team, changes every single game.
Right.
Where like in basketball it doesn't, or in football, but like you said, football is one game, anything can happen. Right. But you very rarely see a story. The last time that a team did what Miami did last year was when the Knicks did it 20-something years earlier, which was and also that year was a lockout shortened season, so the Knicks wouldn't have been the 8th seed if they had played a real season. But I just think it's so hard to make a deep run as a lower seed. Especially when you don't have the same amount of chemistry. I think the Knicks have been also like every game has been a hold your breath like game since Anunoby went down. And then also we don't know how healthy. I mean, remember, Julius Randle is, kind of a different player sometimes in the playoffs. And
he's significantly worse.
And he's going to be coming off an injury. I think it's going to be hard. The only thing the Knicks do have going for them is they're one of the best defensive teams in the NBA.
Which is weird. saying, because for most of our lives they've been one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA.
But I think that the most underrated player in sports, who is the clear MVP of the Knicks, is Josh Hart. I mean, Josh Hart is like basically makes the team go. He has, no pun intended, but he has the most heart on the team. He completely led the team.
Yeah.
He completely led the team to a victory against Cleveland. He's very scrappy, gets all over the court. I think he's very underrated in what he does for the team, because a lot of what he does for the team you can't see in the box score.
Right. No, I totally agree. Yeah, it was a great move signing Josh Hart. But right now I still am worried, because like right now we're the 5 seed, and it could go either way. We could get the 4 seed, or we could slip into a play-in game.
I mean, the one thing that I would point out is, like, I think that the thing that the one thing is, like, I feel like maybe we should get ourselves retooled for next year and see if we can get a star for next year, because I don't think the Knicks have any chance to win the championship this year, even with a healthy team. I don't think that anybody is better than the Celtics. I think the Celtics are far and away the best team.
Right now, no, but the Celtics do have a reputation for choking in big spots.
But they did okay. But they also made the finals 2 years ago and were 1 game away from the finals last year.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Warriors beat the Milwaukee Bucks by 30-something points on Wednesday night, and the Celtics beat the Warriors by 50 on Sunday. And then they lost to the Cavaliers only because they blew a 25-point lead in the fourth quarter. And I think the Celtics are far and away the best team. And I think whoever gets out of the Western Conference is going to be so beaten and bruised, is going to have so much taken out of them because of the gauntlet that you're going to have to play, that I think the Celtics are going to be tough to beat. So if you look at it as we have no chance to win the championship this year and let's retool, I mean, I think that maybe, you hope that, they're more cautious with Julius Randle and OG. And I think they would serve to be better to be more cautious with them, because they would serve us better next year, I think.
Yeah, no. I don't disagree, but I don't think it's time to throw in the towel either. Exactly.
Which any other sport, like I said, like I think any other sport, like baseball, whatever, I think that you could say, listen, if we can get into it, we need to go for it. But I just think that basketball is the one sport where you don't, at the NBA at least, is the one sport where you really don't have, where it's really only a handful of teams that can win the NBA title.
Right. And in the East, the only team that I really think could win it would probably be the Celtics this year.
Right.
In the East. The West, I think, is a lot more interesting, because it could go.
Especially what happened with Karl Anthony Towns today, because he tore his meniscus. Yeah. And they're the 1 seed. I mean, I don't like, if you talk about like the Timberwolves, you talked about the Celtics have a history of choking. I mean, the Timberwolves have a history of not doing well in the playoffs. Minnesota sports teams in general have a history of bad postseason play. Yeah. But I think also that the issue in the West is you have a couple of teams, the top 3 teams, right? I think that, well, let's talk about the top 4. So I think that I think that what's going to be interesting, because I think Minnesota, like you said, Towns tore his meniscus, and I just don't trust them that much. Oklahoma City, I think, is far too young and inexperienced to make a deep run.
Yeah, I agree.
The Nuggets right now would have to play the Suns in the first round, who have their number and have 2 of the best players in the league. It could say 3 of the best players in the league. And the Clippers are a team, I think right now, I would bet on the Clippers to win the whole thing, but I just don't know if you trust those 3 guys' injury history.
Yeah, or just
you're going to make a health bet. I think that the Clippers are a bad health bet.
Russell Westbrook is injured right now.
Westbrook's injured, and then Kawhi has a history of injuries. George has a history of injuries. Harden has a history of injuries.
And also many of those guys are notoriously bad in the playoffs.
Well, yeah, but you could
Harden,
also say
Westbrook.
Well, Leonard is notoriously great in the playoffs though as well.
That's true, but that's 1 to 3.
Right.
So it's like
you only need 1, but yeah.
True.
But would you agree that if they stayed healthy, that the Clippers would probably have the best chance to win the West if they stayed healthy?
Yes. The problem is they don't. stay healthy. I agree.
But I'm saying though, if they stay healthy, you would say they have the best chance.
Yes, because they're the most stacked when it comes to stars. They have the most superstar players, and the West this year is just sort of there's not one clear best team right now. So yeah, I would say so. I would say they probably do, or would. And not to mention, I mean, Kawhi Leonard is great on defense. Paul George is also very good on defense. James Harden is not known for playing good defense, but there's still like enough variety in their starting lineup and enough stars to the point where they would definitely have the best chance. But Russell Westbrook, he's out for how long?
He should be back before the playoffs.
Okay, so it's not going to hurt him that much,
right?
Well, speaking of the West, you see LeBron. He left in the loss to the King. The Lakers lost to the Kings last night, Wednesday night. They blew like a 19-point lead. They were up 19 in the first quarter, I think.
Well, yeah, and then they went down. Then they went on a 30-10 run, and then the Kings kind of controlled the game from there. I mean, the Lakers were also playing on. Excuse me. The Lakers were also playing on the second game in 3 days, which the Kings were as well. But they played the Thunder on Monday night, so that was a really tough game for them. But so I didn't expect the Lakers to win that game. But yeah, I don't know. It's I think like LeBron is like the king of like leaving when he's in like a blowout and stuff. I mean, what was the game? I think in the finals where he started walking off the court before it was over.
Yeah, that did happen.
So I don't know. We'll have to see this one. I mean, there's a lot of injury. Do you like if you remember like if you remember like the game 7 against the Cavs or against the Warriors, when LeBron got fouled before he was going to go to the line right at the end of the game, it like legit looked like he died.
Yeah, well, LeBron is very dramatic.
Very dramatic. Like if you remember the Christmas Day game. He there was like a rebound and he actually kneed Jalen Brown in Jalen Brown's ass, and then LeBron was down for like literally like 20 minutes.
Yeah, he's like a soccer player,
right?
Basically. Well, I don't think he had to leave the game. He said his ankle was bothering him.
Right.
I mean, he was able to play 36 minutes.
Right.
I mean, I don't really care that much that he left. He still was by far. He still played a great game, LeBron.
Well, yeah. He always plays a great game. I mean, that's the scary thing about the Lakers is like if you're Dallas or the Warriors, or the Kings, and it could be the Suns. The last person I want to play in the play-in is the Lakers. Because even if you think you're better than the Lakers, I never want to take my chances in a winner-take-all game against LeBron James. Right. You just don't.
Right. You don't.
I mean, look at the game. Like the Clippers are significantly better than the Lakers, and LeBron James just took over that game the other week in the fourth quarter,
right,
and outscored the team on his own.
But also, like, don't forget last year. I mean, they couldn't beat they were the second. They ended up being the second best team in the West, and
right.
They didn't have a great year at all because
and they still made it to the conference finals and beat the Warriors soundly in the second round.
And don't forget, and the Nuggets were just a really, really good team, and last year they were just almost unbeatable. So
they obliterated everybody they played.
Yeah, so the Lakers are. I think they're one of those teams where they're not a great regular season team, but are just built for the postseason.
But you don't, again, like I said, it's hard to go against, it's hard to make a run, but you really don't want to give yourself, like in the playing game, a situation where you would have to go against not only LeBron, but Anthony Davis is inconsistent, but he has nights where he can be the best player in the NBA.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And also I wanted to add breaking news, because I know this is going to shock a lot of people, and it is a big story, but Ben Simmons is out for the season.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a back issue, isn't it?
Yes. It's maybe one of the, you talk about Sam Darnold. I think this has to be possibly the biggest bust in NBA history. Because if you think about Anthony Bennett was a bust because he got injured. Just like Greg Oden was a bust because he got injured.
Right.
I think that Ben Simmons is worse. I mean, Ben Simmons.
You know who? Okay, I don't know if he's the biggest bust in NBA history, but he's got to be up there. You know who's another big bust? I think that has to be in the conversation is Hasheem Thabeet.
Yeah. Yes.
Hasheem Thabeet was a very big bust.
You know,
would you consider Jordan Hill to be a bust?
Yeah. Markelle Fultz, I would also consider.
Markelle Fultz was a bit of a bust. You know who's who's extremely underrated as a bust is Jabari Parker.
Yes.
Low key, one of the biggest busts in NBA history.
But you know what the saddest thing about the Ben Simmons thing is that he's actually not a bust. He's actually a really, really good player. He just has his mental capacity is not there to be a professional athlete. Like when he was on the court, he was one of the best. When he was playing consistently, he was one of the best defensive players in the league.
Yeah.
And he couldn't hit free throws, which has a lot. I mean, it has like Shaq was just like throwing it too hard. But Ben Simmons' free throws was very mental. And like passing up the dunk against the Hawks, like he had a lot of mental issues. And probably the worst place in the entire planet to play if you have mental issues is Philadelphia. Because they're not going to be very understanding of that. New York as well, but I actually think Philadelphia is worse than New York, especially because there's only one team in each league as well. So it's not so all the people in the city like that one team. But yeah, that's the saddest part is that he's actually a really good player, and he's just not on. He just has no mental capacity to play on the court. Michael Kay, I think, said that baseball players, which I'm sure all athletes. They said if you want to say that you're hurt and don't want to play and you're not actually hurt, say that you have a back injury because it's impossible to prove a back injury.
True. Well, apparently he actually had to get surgery for his back.
I mean, yeah, but he's been saying he's had a back injury for, years.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I don't really have that much sympathy for him because Philadelphia actually tried to get him a lot of help. Like they were actually trying to get him mental counseling and stuff. And so when you don't take help, I guess then.
Yeah, or maybe he did take help and it just didn't work very well.
Right.
Well, I mean, so Ben Simmons is just a total disaster. And yeah, it just sucks it must suck being a Net fan right now.
Yes.
So I don't know. You see the Stephen A. Smith, Pat McAfee stuff?
I read the article today. Yeah.
So apparently there was a big blow up on a phone call about some type of project, and which reportedly Pat McAfee got banned from First Take, but they both came out and said that didn't happen. It would be a weird thing to say you're banned from First Take. That just gives him more free time. Doesn't sound that terrible.
Well, and apparently Pat McAfee called Stephen A. motherfucker in the conversation. But yeah, this is I mean Pat McAfee I feel like is having like mounting incidents at ESPN.
Yeah.
Like if you remember he went at the guy who's one of the people in the front office at ESPN during the Aaron Rodgers thing and said he basically was saying like the powers that be were trying to ruin the show. I generally like Pat McAfee, but I can't imagine that ESPN would pay all this money to McAfee and then try and ruin the show.
Well, there could have been disagreements amongst different individuals. That's the only thing.
I mean, also, but there's a lot of shows like even Seinfeld, right? Had NBC come and give suggestions or we want this and we want that. Like a lot shows, no matter in their industry, you're going to get a lot of probably feedback, especially ones you don't like from network executives.
Right. Especially at big corporations.
Right.
Maybe not so much at a place like say HBO where you get a lot more creative freedom, but a place like ESPN, NBC, CBS, wherever, they probably would.
Well, I know that Larry David frequently had run-ins with NBC's brass over during Seinfeld.
Right, because Larry David is a creative genius and is probably very stubborn when it comes to a lot of that stuff.
Right.
And
did you know that he said that Larry David said that when they wrote the contest episode, if NBC had declined it, he would have walked off the show and left.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, or at least would have stayed, or at least would have walked off, and maybe they would have convinced him to come back. Maybe he would have left and then came back and pretended it didn't happen.
That's one of the greatest episodes in the history of television.
That's based on a true story.
Yes, correct.
Larry David did that when he was on SNL.
But I mean, the contest is one of the best.
The contest, yeah,
obviously. Yeah, it's one of the best episodes of television. But yeah, I mean, in terms of this, yeah, I mean, it's not. I think that both sides said it. Had been resolved. I feel like probably a lot of this does go on, and it's just like because of who it was that it gets blown up in the media or written about.
Yeah, no, that part's definitely true. All right, so I want to get into some of this New Jersey high school basketball. We have the video of it, or okay, we don't have video. Okay, well, so basically in New Jersey between Manasquan and Camden was like the number 1 team in the country or something. Yeah. Basically, Manasquan won. They got the last. They hit a buzzer beater, and the refs called it a basket. They allowed it. And then after the refs got together or something, they overruled it and said that the ball was in his hands. Which, first of all, you can tell from the picture in the New York Post that it was not. There was 0.2 seconds left, and the ball is already in the air. Yes. So I don't know what the hell happened. It seems like it almost seems like corrupt in a way. Like, why? Like, from what I understand, the refs already left the court.
Well, I think there was a confusion in that I think one ref called it off, and then another ref went like that, like count it. So I think there was a confusion. It was obviously very bang bang kind of thing. I mean, you can't even hear the buzzer go off in the video, and so I mean, it was crazy. Yeah, they were Camden are number 1 in the country, or in the state, and Manasquan was big underdogs, and then Camden hits a free throw. Manasquan come down 1, miss, put it back in, but like you said, way before the buzzer, and then they sort of relayed it out, say the refs talked about and said, it was after the buzzer, and actually the New Jersey Athletic Association said, in a statement that it was that they apologized for it, which doesn't really do much. But yeah, so it was a crazy sequence. The one thing it did teach me is that people actually live down the shore full time all year round.
Yeah, well, Camden's not near the shore, but
Manasquan is a major shore town.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. I mean, based on all of this stuff, Manasquan's got to be ruled the winner. I mean, they acknowledged that that it was the wrong call. How? It just makes no sense because they initially said that they won.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't initially say that. One ref said it was, another ref said it wasn't. It wasn't initially called that, and then they got together. I agree that they got completely screwed. It's and if you're a player on the team, you'll probably talk about that for years.
The rest of your life, you'll talk about
that. But yeah, I mean, it was. I don't know if they declared the winner. I like Frank the Tank from Barstool said that Camden should do the right thing and forfeit the next game. Like, there's no chance they're doing that. But
I don't think they should either. They should just take it if they're ruled the winner. It's not their fault.
I don't know if they can do that, because then you could also, I guess, say in that same vein, well, there was a travel called with 5 minutes left that shouldn't have been called, and then they come down and score, so we should be ruled the winner. I think it gets into interesting territory there, which is kind of murky.
Yeah, but so Manasquan Superintendent Dr. Frank Cassian is threatening legal action. I just want to see a just and ethical decision being made by the NJSIAA. And that is what those officials are there for. So it says this is, he told the Asbury Park press, didn't know Asbury Park had their own press. This is something different. There is physical evidence that shows the game wasn't over and the ball went through. So there you have it. I mean, yeah, he's got a point.
I don't know what legal precedent there is, though.
Yeah.
Is there legal precedent for a bad call?
Did he say legal?
He said,
oh, yeah. Oh, he's threatening legal action. I mean, against who and for what? I guess the refs individually?
Right.
Like,
I mean, I don't know. Unless there was like some, payment or something that was rigged, then I don't think there's much legal precedent on a bad call. It was just a bad call. And it sucks. It sucks if you're Manasquan and you work that hard to get there and that happens. But I feel like there's probably a myriad of bad calls in New Jersey high school basketball and in high school basketball around the country.
No, that's fair.
So it just happens. I mean, I also, yes, and it was, Camden's known as one of the better teams, certainly in public school. In New Jersey, there's a lot of good private schools, but the public schools, in terms of basketball. But it sucks, and it was a crazy play, and it would suck if you were like the fan, like enjoying it for 1 minute, and that gets called off. Like I can't even imagine.
I mean, the thing is, it's not just evidence. There's proof that it was the wrong call. And
but I feel like if you want to do that, like you could also say, well, there was a wrong call made a minute into the game that led to a basket, and it was a 1 point game. Like I feel like if you're going to say that, like it could lead to a bunch of stuff. It's a bad call. It sucks. That's all I could say about it. I mean, it was a crazy moment, and it's kind of made like national headlines. Some reporters were tweeting it out because they had video of it. But yeah, crazy game. It's far to go too, Camden to Manasquan. So,
how far is it?
That's got to be a few hours. That's got to be an hour and a half at least. But Manasquan's over by like Belmar. Manasquan is famous for Osprey nightclub. It's been there for like 100 something years. But yeah, I feel bad for them, especially when you're about to make a huge upset over Camden.
Yeah, it's awful. I feel terrible for these kids. That just seems unbearable. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about. So Jake Paul is going to fight Mike Tyson. So I don't know. I'm just kind of surprised. How old is Mike Tyson now? He's got to be at least 50.
Yeah, Mike Tyson is old. Let me look it up. He is 57.
Okay, so he's 57. He's actually going to fight Jake. I guess if you think about it, it's a fair fight because it's Jake Paul versus a 57-year-old.
Jake Paul is about a month older than you. Okay. So if you were fighting Mike Tyson, but yeah, I mean it's a fair fight. But so what happened basically was Jake Paul lost to Tommy Fury maybe a year ago, a little bit more than that. And since then, he's had 2 fights that nobody's cared about. So in terms of that, I think that he needed to make a big splash in who he fights. And one of the major things about this is it's actually on Netflix. It's going to be on Netflix. The fight, which is good because a lot of these fights have been on pay-per-view. And so I think he needs to do something to get to get some more attention. And I think that obviously Mike Tyson is looking for a paycheck here. He did fight Roy Jones Jr. Years ago, which was actually the fight that he fought Jones Jr. ironically was the same fight card was when Jake Paul knocked out Nate Robinson, which is what kind of pushed Jake Paul to be a boxer. But yeah, I kind of boxing is kind of obviously it's been dying in terms of what it was, but it's kind of now become like this, like, farcical spectacles of fights now, where you have like Floyd Mayweather fighting Logan Paul and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like it's become a whole spectacle now.
Where a bunch of people who aren't even fighters become fighters or
no, but
that one
I mean, Jake Paul is actually like kind of a good fighter, but he also fights like like you said, is like in a fair fight. Like he's also very clinical about who he fights. Like he fought Ben Askren, who's a UFC fighter, but he's only a wrestler and he's boxing him. Or Tyron Woodley fought who's very it lost like his last 7 fights or something. And then when he did go up against Nate Robinson, who's not even close to a boxer, and then when he went up against Tommy Fury, who is a boxer, and he lost, but not that badly. But so he's actually not a bad boxer, but I think that his point of it is to get a lot of attention and a lot of buys on pay-per-view and whatever. So I think this will bring a lot more attention to him, obviously, even though I think it's clearly like a spectacle. I mean, Mike Tyson's almost 60.
Right, but Mike Tyson could probably still fight. I'm sort of surprised, if anything, that Mike Tyson agreed to do it.
I think he's probably definitely looking for a paycheck.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. They must be paying him a shit ton of money.
I think Mike Tyson was one of those guys who used to go broke a lot. But so because he did fight Roy Jones Jr. I mean, Mike Tyson has one of the like crazy, when they did like that O.J. Simpson documentary for like a week on ESPN, it was actually originally supposed to be about Mike Tyson.
Really?
But then Mike Tyson, this was according to Bill Simmons, who created it, but then Mike Tyson wrote a book and did a one-man show about himself. So then they were like, well, he's very open about it, so we're not going to do it because a lot of people already know this stuff. But he has one of the most interesting lives when you look at like what's going on in his life. Do you remember when he did the interview with a morning show in Toronto? And he had met with Rob Ford. Do you remember Rob Ford? He was the mayor of Toronto, who was like very in the news. And they were like, and the guy, the interviewer asked him like, "Oh, what do you think of Rob Ford meeting? Do you think that his critics will say something about meeting with you, considering you're a convicted rapist?" And Mike Tyson didn't really answer the question. And then the next question, the Canadian guy asked him, he's like, is it more nerve-wracking to do a play on Broadway, or is it more nerve-wracking to box? And Mike Tyson, live on TV, like the Today Show, he goes, it's more nerve-wracking to talk to a rat piece of shit like you. And then the guy's like, come on. And Mike Tyson's like, no, because you're a piece of shit. Like on like live, like Today Show in Canada.
That piece of shit.
I love Mike Tyson. One of the things, Mike Tyson had 55 knockouts in his career, and over half of them were in the first round, which is insane.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been a big boxing fan. I mean, when I think of Mike Tyson, I associate him when he was on The Hangover, when he knocked out Alan, while singing "In the Air Tonight." That's right. What I think of with Mike Tyson, and him biting Evander
Holyfield's ear. Yeah, and he had one of his most famous when he fought Michael Spinks, who at the time was the champion, and Mike Tyson was not the champion. And it was like, going to be one of the biggest fights, and it was hyped up for a long time, and Tyson knocked him out in 25 seconds or something like that. Yeah. So I think he's kind of underrated as one of the better boxers. I mean, he was lethal in the ring, but obviously now he's 57, and so.
Yeah, well, yeah, he can't, and he seems a little heavy now.
Yes, he looked a little slow, but yeah, I mean,
he's still Mike Tyson.
Right, and so he's still going to generate though a lot of revenue. Like they said, they're getting millions for the fight, and then they're going to get portions of the pay-per-view, and they'll probably get portions of the gate as well. And so that's what happened. What happened in boxing basically was one of the reasons it died is it went to pay-per-view. So guys actually get paid a lot more, way more boxing than they used to, because they get percentages of the pay-per-view and stuff. But the sport died, and a lot of like big heavyweight fighters, guys who would be big heavyweight fighters, went to other sports like football instead of like back in the day they might have boxed.
Right. There's more options, and it's also like people talk about like the thing is, boxing is also the worst sport to go to professionally because of how physically demanding it is. I mean, it's right. People talk about football, but like boxing is a million times worse because your job is to beat people up, or else you get beat up. Like,
yes, they're trying to kill each other, basically.
Yeah, basically, and like that's really
No, you can't tell me that. That the way that Muhammad Ali's life was in the last 20 years was not due to him just being continuously hit in the head.
Right. And it's also usually sort of like an underclass of people that become boxers. It's rarely ever people with like a lot of money that become boxers.
Right.
Or people who even have the option to do other sports. It is like it seems like people who become boxers were like desperate from the time they were young and didn't have many other options. And that's why they become boxers. Or even like try it or even try it. Like,
right. And they're used to fighting. Yeah, no, I agree.
By the way, one last story. Did you see this thing with the Chiefs fans Frostbite? Apparently a bunch of people were recommended for amputation.
What, from the game?
Yeah.
No, I did not see that. From the game against Miami, you're talking about.
Yeah. So a bunch of people got frostbite. I mean, I don't. Hold on a second. Do I have the story right here? It was on SB Nation. Hold on. Hold on a second. Yeah, so according to the New York Post, Chiefs fans suffering frostbite need amputations after attending the playoff game, according to a doctor. Okay, so here it is. 70% of frostbite patients that the Grossman Burn Center at Research Medical Center in Kansas City, Missouri received since January are being advised to undergo the life-altering procedure, which is the amputation. My question is, that sounds really big, but how many people actually go to the hospital or receive treatment for frostbite in the game? Like, they say 70%, but how many people went? 10? So 7 out of 10?
Right. Yeah,
it sounds a little bit misleading.
How many people went where?
I mean, went to receive treatment for frostbite.
Right. Right. I know that. I mean, it was a game that they thought they might have had to cancel because it was that cold.
Yeah.
And again, like the thing about football, like going to a game, especially football in that freezing weather, is you're not active, which you have to be. If it's really cold, it's important to keep, moving.
Right.
And stuff, because you can get really cold. Did you remember the guys died in the yard watching the Chiefs game? There was like a guy. Do you remember that story?
Well, apparently it had something to do with drugs.
Well, yeah, because the guy didn't know because he was asleep for 4 days or something.
Yeah.
And they came to do a wellness check, and then all the people were dead in the yard. But one of the reasons, drugs. But one of the reasons was it was so cold as well.
Yeah. They froze to death.
I mean, yeah, it's horrible. Like, at least, I mean, not to shit on Kansas City, but if I'm going to live in like a place like Kansas City, I would at least like it to be warm.
Yeah.
The fact that it's that and it's cold is like insanity. What about Chiefsaholic too? See, he pleaded guilty today.
Yeah, Chiefsaholic. I think that was last week. Was it? Yeah, the guy he robbed a bank. And by the way, he what?
A bunch of banks.
A bunch of banks. The thing is, bank robbers have to be the dumbest of all criminals because it's virtually impossible to get away with it. Like, robbing a bank is impossible to get away with because they have, like, banks have more security than the White House probably. Like,
especially in this day and age, yeah.
Yeah, like you're gonna be caught. They even chain the pens. You can't even steal a pen from the bank. like robbing a bank. Like, if you're a bank robber, you should go to jail for being dumb more than anything because that is the last thing you could ever get away with.
Right. Yeah. That was one of the crazy. They have like some of the like underrated, like craziest fans, the Chiefs, like just in terms of like crazy people. And basically he was going like from city to city, to the Chiefs games. And I guess one of the ways he was funding it was robbing banks, which I do always wonder. Obviously everyone's not robbing banks, but I do always wonder, like, these guys on Instagram and stuff who go to every game, how the hell are they affording that? Like, I always wonder.
the thing is, I think a lot of them make money off social media.
Yeah, true.
And the truth is, this guy Chiefsaholic was famous enough that he could have crowdfunded it. You don't think anybody would actually send him like $5 on GoFundMe to go to?
Well, then he got arrested. He got given an ankle monitor, and then he was he cut it off and went on the run. Remember?
Yeah.
So that was a crazy story. They just did an ESPN featured on it too. I mean, that was one of the crazier like under the radar stories.
Yeah. He fled, which caused the which got the FBI involved.
Well, the FBI is actually always involved in a bank robbery.
Yeah, I'm sure they are because everything is federal.
Federal, yeah.
And in his case, it was in a bunch of different states.
It was because I think he was going to the I think they were playing the Texans when he got caught because it was in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Where he got caught, and I think he was actually like on the way to the game, which is wild.
Yeah, imagine that. That's worse than New Jersey Transit train not getting there on time.
It really is.
Yeah, so yeah, that guy is a real idiot, I'd have to say.
Yeah, like you said, it's impossible to do it now. It's really
nowadays.
I mean, I feel like pretty much every crime now though as well. Like there's just so much like advanced.
It's harder. Like,
way harder.
Like getting away with murder is so difficult now.
But like getting away with murder in like the 1930s must have been like the easiest thing ever.
Well, yeah. Well, the mafia was huge in the 1930s.
Right. But like unless someone saw you, like
now you might as well drop your driver's license at the crime scene. Right.
And I mean they have evidence of like if you like the guy who did the one in Idaho, he got caught because he had like a little DNA on the sheath of the knife, and then they took the dad's trash out and found it.
Yeah.
The guy in Long Island, they found it from pizza crust.
Yeah, like they get it from like from like the most random things.
Yeah.
And your DNA is everywhere. Fingerprints are everywhere.
Everything's everywhere. Yeah.
It's like that's
why a lot of, if you ever see like people, I don't think people realize this either because they think they're just trying to be good cops. But if you ever see like an interrogation video and they hand someone like, do you want a glass of water? One of the reasons is you get the DNA from the cup as well.
Right. That's the total reason. Or they want
right.
Want this
well, I think a lot of people think it's just
offer a cigarette or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And some criminals are actually smart. They turn it down.
Right. Well, the smart ones won't even say anything to the police because anything you say can get like completely twisted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so basically I'm saying if you're a Chiefs fan, don't rob any banks. All right. Cool. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll be back next week. This is Moving the Goalposts.